everybody. Welcome to ICC's Game of the Week, with your host, as always, Joel Benjamin. The Aeroflot Open seemed to have a lot of draws, particularly in the closing rounds, but there were some interesting games. Larry Christiansen has the honor of presenting the saga of Wen Yang, who had two of the most spectacular games in the tournament. In this show, we will examine an unusual battle between Russian grandmasters Ernesto Inarkiev and Mikhail Kobalia. This eighth-round matchup featured a sharp opening, tactical skirmishes, and a surprising move, ultimately paying dividends. Okay, let's get to it. Inarkiev playing white, and he's rather famously named after Che Guevara. Says Queen's Gambit accepted, which straight Queen's Gambit accepted, you don't actually see that much at the Grandmaster level. Of course, there's nothing wrong with it. And the move E4 seems to be considered to be the most important response as White takes over the center. White could, of course, put the pawn on E3, either on move 3 or on move 4, and take back on C4, and that often leads to either isolated queen-pawn positions or symmetrical pawn structure endings if White should eventually take a pawn on C5 to capture D takes C5 later. But this leads to a sharper fight right away, and Black essentially has three moves: E5, which I think is considered to be the main line, Knight F6, which provokes the E-pawn forward, and finally the move played, Knight C6, which actually provokes the D-pawn forward. And it's not too much of a trade secret to say, I think, that this is one of the openings that my team prepared for Deep Blue to play against Kasparov. Of course, it never came up on the board. White plays Knight F3. I remember 20 years ago that we thought that Bishop E3 was either more common or the more critical move, not allowing this pin. But now it's quite popular to play this way, and grandmasters don't worry so much about possible double pawns that might come about. Bishop F4. Of course, this is not one of those positions where you can play Knight takes E5, because unfortunately the black pawn in C4 is preventing a Bishop B5 check. If that pawn were not there, the Knight takes E5 might very well work for White. But anyway, Bishop F4, attacking the Knight. Knight peels back with a tempo, and it's very important that Black get the E-pawn forward so as not to be stuck and unable to develop. And here, if the bishop goes to G3, it may look like a nice diagonal, but after Black plays the move E5, that could change. The bishop could end up just out of play on G3, much like it does in Roy Lopez or Four Knights in that type of position. So White retreats the bishop to E3. Now, of course, the pawn on C4 is not defended. So Black develops, and he takes back the pawn on C4. Okay, so in this position, a number of games Black has just played solid move A6, which both stops a check on B5 and also prevents a knight from coming to B5, which could be relevant when Black puts the bishop on D6. So Black is looking to just develop his pieces. It did not fare very well in a high-level matchup a couple of years ago in a game that you might have seen on ICC that went like this: Bishop E2, breaking the pin, Bishop D6, Knight D2. Logical to trade the bishops because White has set up a light square pawn formation, so he's trading off his bad bishop. Castles, Queen E7, Rook FD1,